There is a widespread yet flawed belief that kindness in men, particularly in nice guys, stems from weakness. Many assume that being considerate equates to being soft, as if generosity and resilience cannot coexist. However, there is a stark difference between someone who is kind because they crave validation and someone who is kind because they deliberately choose to be. Sigma males firmly belong to the latter category. Their kindness is not rooted in a need for acceptance or approval, but rather in a self-assured decision made from a position of quiet strength. A Sigma male's respect for others is not driven by fear of confrontation, nor is his willingness to help others motivated by an expectation of reciprocation. He is not maneuvering for social leverage or seeking external validation. Instead, his approach to life is calculated, his actions intentional. Former FBI Special Agent Jack Shar encapsulates this mindset perfectly. True power does not lie in flaunting strength, that resides in the ability to decide when to withhold it. When a naturally strong individual ceases to be accommodating, it is not a knee-jerk reaction fueled by emotions. It is a cold, strategic withdrawal of mercy. The majority of people fail to recognize this shift for what it is. They misinterpret a Sigma male's transformation as an abrupt outburst when, in reality, it is a carefully measured and irreversible recalibration. A threshold has been crossed, one that cannot be undone. When his kindness is repeatedly disregarded or exploited, he does not resort to anger or petty retaliation. Instead, he methodically restructures the way he interacts with the world and the people in it. This transition is not about adopting cruelty or bitterness. It is about shedding the polite facade that once concealed his true power. Consider a master martial artist who deliberately avoids unnecessary fights, not out of cowardice, but because he is acutely aware of his own capabilities. But what happens when he finally chooses to stop restraining himself? That is the kind of transformation we are about to explore. Let's break down 8 defining consequences of a Sigma male deciding to stop being nice and why this shift tends to leave people utterly blindsided. Number 1. He becomes completely unapologetic about his priorities. Sigma males are known for their independent mindset, but when they are still in their nice phase, they may occasionally compromise their own needs to accommodate others. They might rearrange their schedules, offer assistance at their own expense, or tolerate inconveniences just to maintain harmony and avoid unnecessary friction. This is often mistaken for weakness, when in reality, it is simply their way of being considerate. However, once a Sigma male decides to stop being nice, all of that changes permanently. He becomes fiercely protective of his time, energy, and goals, operating with a level of detachment that shocks those who once benefited from his patience and generosity. If something does not align with his vision or contribute to his personal growth, he has absolutely no problem cutting it out without offering explanations, excuses, or apologies. This shift creates ripple effects in every area of his life. Friendships. Those who once relied on his willingness to always be available for emotional support or last-minute favors suddenly find themselves ignored. If a relationship lacks depth or mutual respect, he distances himself without warning. Work environment. Employers or colleagues who exploited his work ethic by overloading him with responsibilities may realize he no longer tolerates it. He sets firm boundaries and stops overextending himself for people who never reciprocate. Romantic relationships. A partner who expected him to always put their needs above his own may be blindsided when he starts prioritizing himself first. He no longer tolerates emotional manipulation, guilt-tripping, or unnecessary drama. This transformation is not about becoming selfish, it is about becoming selective. He no longer wastes energy on things that drain him or people who take him for granted. Instead, he focuses on what genuinely matters: personal growth, self-mastery, and meaningful connections. And the most important part, once he reaches this stage, there is no going back. A Sigma male who has learned to put himself first will never allow himself to be controlled, manipulated, or taken advantage of again. His priorities are his own, and he no longer seeks approval from anyone. Number 2. His tolerance for games hits zero. Think of a Sigma male like a calm ocean, peaceful and deep. He doesn't seek trouble, nor does he feel the need to prove himself. But don't mistake his calmness for weakness. Beneath the surface lies a force you don't want to awaken. Jordan Peterson discusses the importance of setting boundaries in 12 Rules for Life. He states, "Do not let people do things to you that you dislike." The Sigma male lives by this rule. He's kind, not because he's weak, but because he chooses to be. He gives people the benefit of the doubt over and over, but here's the catch. Every time someone disrespects him, manipulates him, or takes him for granted, they chip away at his patience. And then one day it happens, the line gets crossed. Maybe it's the friend who constantly mocks him in front of others, the coworker who steals his ideas, the partner who plays mind games to control him. The Sigma male doesn't explode. He doesn't scream or throw a fit. Instead, he goes silent, his energy shifts. It's the calm before a storm, you can feel it in the air. Dr. Ramani Durvasula, a clinical psychologist and expert on toxic behavior, explains that people often mistake kindness for naivety. They assume they can push and push without consequences. But when a Sigma stops being nice, it's a wake-up call. His kindness wasn't weakness, it was a choice. And now, he's choosing to take it back. This is when everything changes. The jokes stop landing. The excuses stop working. The guilt trips fall flat. It's not anger, it's indifference. The Sigma male doesn't waste time explaining himself. He simply removes himself from the game. And that's when people realize they've messed up. The calm motion they took for granted, it's gone. What's left is a quiet, uncheckable force that doesn't look back. The games are over, the Sigma male has moved on. And everyone else is left standing there, wondering what just happened. Number 3. He withdraws from toxic environments without warning. Unlike alphas, who might confront problems head-on with aggression or dominance, a Sigma male's method of dealing with negativity is far more subtle but equally devastating. He disappears. When he decides to stop being nice, he no longer sees any reason to tolerate toxic relationships, unnecessary drama, or environments that drain his energy. Instead of engaging in endless arguments, trying to prove his point, or attempting to fix dysfunctional situations, he simply walks away without explanation, without fanfare, and without looking back. This sudden withdrawal leaves people utterly confused. Those who took his presence for granted are left wondering what went wrong. The ones who relied on his emotional support, intelligence, or problem-solving skills may suddenly find themselves struggling. They might attempt to reach out, offering fake concern or belated apologies. But by the time they realize he is gone, it is already too late. A Sigma male does not make impulsive decisions when he mentally checks out. It means he has already analyzed the situation, weighed his options, and determined that leaving is the best choice. Once that conclusion is reached, there is almost no chance of convincing him to return. This shift can be especially shocking in professional settings or social circles where his presence was a stabilizing force. At work, his coworkers and employers may suddenly feel the weight of his absence. The tasks he once handled effortlessly become overwhelming, and his unique problem-solving skills are noticeably missing. The workplace atmosphere might shift, as those who previously undervalued him now struggle to fill the void. In friendships, so-called friends who only valued him for what he could provide, whether it was emotional support, strategic advice, or a calm presence, find themselves lost. They begin to realize he was the one keeping things together, but by then, he has already moved on. In relationships, a romantic partner who took his patience for granted might initially believe he is just taking a break and will return. But a Sigma male who has recognized toxicity in a relationship will never reattach himself to it. The most devastating part, his absence is louder than any confrontation ever could be. There are no arguments, no dramatic exits, no last warnings, just silence. And in that silence, people finally begin to understand the depth of what they lost. Number 4. The power shift. Ever played with a magnet as a kid? Remember how it could suddenly flip and push away what it once attracted? That's what happens when a Sigma male stops being nice. The entire dynamic shifts. Before, people got used to his flexibility. They'd push boundaries, make demands, expect him to adjust. And because he was choosing to be kind, he often would. But once that kindness runs out, everything flips. Dr. Leonard Sachs explains it this way. When someone who's naturally powerful stops accommodating others, it's like gravity suddenly changing direction. Everything that worked before stops working. The person who used to get favors just by asking now gets a simple no. The one who relied on guilt trips finds their words bouncing off like rubber bands. The friend who always needed just one more favor, now they're talking to a wall. The real shock comes to those who never expected resistance. They try their usual tricks, bleeding, pressuring, promising. But it's like watching someone try to push a boulder uphill. Nothing moves. This isn't about revenge. It's not about being mean. The Sigma male isn't trying to hurt anyone. He's just stopped letting others control the situation. And that simple shift in power, it leaves everyone else scrambling, trying to figure out the new rules of a game they didn't even realize they were. Number 5. The final warning most people miss. When a Sigma male stops being nice, it's not an overnight shift. There's always a moment, a final warning that most people miss. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's subtle, like a quiet tap on the shoulder before the door slams shut. John Gottman, a leading researcher on relationships, calls these moments bids for connection. They're small signals people give when they're trying to communicate something important. For the Sigma male, this final warning might come as a calm comment, a direct question, or even a long, silent look. It's his way of saying, "This is your last chance. Don't push me further." But here's the problem. Most people don't take it seriously. They're so used to his kindness that they assume he'll just let things slide again. They don't realize that this time, it's different. This isn't him being nice. This is him being clear. Take, for example, a friend who constantly borrows money but never pays it back. The Sigma male may have helped him a few times out of kindness. But after being taken for granted repeatedly, he decides to stop. He doesn't give an explanation. But his friend keeps reaching out, thinking he'll eventually cave in. Dr. Robert Glover, author of No More Mr. Nice Guy, explains that people often ignore these warnings because they're used to getting away with bad behavior. They assume the Sigma male will keep forgiving them. But when he stops being nice, it's not because he's angry. It's because he's done. And that's when it hits them. The final warning wasn't a joke. It wasn't a bluff. It was the last thread holding everything together. Once it's gone, there's no going back. The Sigma male doesn't argue. He doesn't explain. He just walks away. And the people left behind, they're stuck wondering why they didn't listen when they had the chance. Number 6. He becomes completely unapologetic about his priorities. Sigma males are known for their fiercely independent mindset, but in their nice phase, they often make small sacrifices to maintain harmony. They may rearrange their schedules, extend help when it's inconvenient, or tolerate disruptions just to avoid unnecessary conflict. Whether it's adjusting their plans for a friend, taking on extra work at the office, or going out of their way to accommodate a partner's needs. They do so without complaint until one day, they stop. Once a Sigma male decides to stop being nice, everything changes dramatically. He becomes fiercely protective of his time, energy, and goals. If something does not align with his vision, contribute to his personal growth, or offer genuine value, he eliminates it swiftly and without remorse. Unlike before, when he might have felt guilty about saying no, he now does so without hesitation. He no longer explains himself, justifies his choices, or seeks approval from others. This shift can be a harsh wake-up call for those who once benefited from his patience and generosity. Friends who took his time for granted may suddenly find themselves ignored or deprioritized. The late-night calls, last-minute favors, and one-sided relationships all come to a stop. Employers who exploited his work ethic and relied on his willingness to go the extra mile might be shocked to find he no longer tolerates being overworked or underappreciated. He will set clear boundaries, and if they are crossed, he will walk away without second thoughts. Romantic partners who expected his constant availability will be confronted with a version of him that no longer bends over backward to please. He prioritizes himself above all else, and if a relationship no longer serves his well-being, he distances himself, emotionally and physically. This shift does not mean he becomes selfish, it means he becomes selective. The Sigma male understands that energy is finite, and wasting it on people or situations that do not align with his purpose is a disservice to himself. Instead of being drained by unnecessary obligations, he redirects his focus toward what truly matters. And once he reaches this stage, there is no going back. Anyone who tries to guilt trip or manipulate him into his old ways will find that their influence no longer works. His priorities are no longer negotiable, and his time is no longer up for grabs. Number 7. The energy shift becomes unmistakable. People often underestimate the power of a Sigma male's presence. When he's in a room, even if he's quiet, his energy is noticeable, calm, controlled, and intentional. But when he stops being nice, that energy shifts in a way that people can't ignore. At first, it might seem subtle. His responses become shorter, his interactions more deliberate. The warmth in his voice fades, and his once inviting presence feels distant, almost unapproachable. It's not about rudeness or hostility, it's about an undeniable change in the way he carries himself. Psychologist Dr. Jordan Peterson describes this kind of shift as the moment when someone decides to stop betraying themselves. Sigma males don't tolerate dishonesty, not from others and especially not from themselves. If they realize they've been tolerating too much nonsense, they make an internal decision to stop immediately. People around them feel this shift, even if they can't explain it. The friendly coworker who used to chat with him casually now senses a barrier. The friend who used to joke at his expense suddenly feels uncomfortable. The manipulative ex who used to control the narrative realizes her words don't land the same way anymore. This is where regret often kicks in for those who took him for granted. They don't just lose his kindness, they lose access to his presence, his attention, and the silent but powerful energy he brought into their lives. That's when they realize his niceness wasn't weakness, it was a privilege. Number 8. His focus shifts entirely toward himself. When a Sigma male stops being nice, something profound happens. His energy stops being spent on people who don't deserve it. Instead, it gets redirected toward his own goals, ambitions, and personal growth. This isn't just a casual shift, it's a total recalibration of priorities. Where he once might have spent time explaining himself, trying to maintain relationships, or giving second chances, he now spends that time on his career, his health, his passions, or simply his peace of mind. Dr. Robert Glover, author of No More Mr. Nice Guy, explains that when men stop trying to please everyone, they unlock their full potential. They stop seeking approval and start living for themselves. Sigma males naturally embody this philosophy, but when they reach a breaking point, it amplifies even more. The result, he levels up mentally, physically, and emotionally. He becomes even more independent and self-sufficient. He attracts higher quality people who respect his time and energy. And ironically, the same people who once took him for granted start noticing this transformation. They see him succeeding, growing, and moving forward without them, and it stings. The woman who thought she had him wrapped around her finger sees him thriving without a second glance in her direction. The friend who assumed he'd always be there watches him flourish in new, more fulfilling relationships. But by then, it's too late. Once a Sigma male stops being nice, he doesn't just walk away from people, he walks toward a better version of himself. And that's a journey he doesn't turn back from. If you found this video insightful or relatable, why not join our growing community? Subscribe to the channel for more content exploring the mindsets, traits, and behaviors of Sigma males. Your engagement helps us dive deeper into these unique perspectives. Be sure to like this video if it resonated with you, share it with someone who might appreciate it, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Remember, as a Sigma male or someone inspired by their path, staying true to yourself is the ultimate strength. Keep evolving, stay strong, and we'll see you in the next video.